There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. Darkness does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, a weight settling on the chest. An emptiness creeping into the heart, a numbness replacing what once felt alive. One day you wake and realize that meaning has slipped from your hands. The world is still there, people laughing, phones buzzing, clocks ticking, but you are somewhere else, distant and silent. Depression is like that. Not loud, not violent, but deeply, painfully quiet. Carl Jung understood that silence. He believed that depression does not come merely to steal. It comes to reveal. To him, the darkness is not the enemy. It is a messenger from the soul, a summons we rarely accept willingly. In his own life, depression arrived as a profound spiritual crisis, a calling into the depths he never asked for, but without which his life's work would never have been born. Jung was not always the wise figure history remembers. He once stood terrified inside his own mind, unsure if he would ever find his way back. Born in 1875, Jung spent childhood wandering between two psychologic continents, the rational world of his father, a Swiss pastor, and the mystical dream realm of his mother. He felt shadows pressing in, even then. He sensed that human beings were torn between what they showed to the world and what pulsed hidden beneath their skin. Years later, when he became the brilliant protege of Sigmund Freud, he thought he had finally found his path, the mind explained through logic, desire, and instinct. But Jung couldn't stay within those walls. He felt life required something deeper, something spiritual, something ancient. Breaking away from Freud cost him everything: identity, companionship, belonging. Once celebrated as the crowned prince of psychoanalysis, Jung suddenly stood alone at the edge of a psychic abyss. He felt as though the ground beneath him had cracked open and his very self was falling inward. That descent became his dark night of the soul. In the years that followed, Jung's inner world erupted into visions and voices. He feared madness. Yet instead of running, he listened. He treated his depression as a guide, and in doing so, he unlocked a truth that would transform modern psychology. Depression is not a failure of the self. It is the self trying to survive. Depression happens when the soul has been forced too long to live a life that does not belong to it. When we silence desire for the sake of acceptance, when we swallow pain to appear strong, when we trade authenticity for approval, the inner world begins to starve. The psyche responds by withdrawing energy from the outside world. It says, "No more pretending." It pulls us down, inward, and alone. Not to punish us, but to make us stop. Jung called the social mask we wear, the persona, the smile we offer, the agreeable version of ourselves designed to keep life functioning. But beneath the persona lies the shadow, not just the dark impulses we reject, but also the abandoned light, our unlived creativity, unspoken truth, and buried longing. Everything we push away becomes a ghost inside us. Depression is what happens when the shadow becomes too heavy to ignore, Jung wrote. Depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in and listen. What a radical proposition. We want to escape, anesthetize, fight, or deny depression. Jung asks us to dialogue with it. He suggests that within pain lies a message about who we were meant to be. Modern culture rushes to fix, medicate, and silence the symptoms. Jung never rejected help. He valued therapy and medicine, but he warned about treating only the surface. If we numb the pain without understanding it, the message goes unheard. Depression is not merely sadness. It is the soul's protest against a life that suffocates its truth. He believed despair often arises when meaning collapses. When goals that once motivated you no longer matter, when accomplishments no longer satisfy, when relationships feel distant. When the future looks blank, the psyche is signaling that something essential has gone missing. Meaning is oxygen for the spirit. Without it, life continues biologically, but dies emotionally. Jung devoted himself to helping others find that meaning again, not through external achievements, but through the inner journey he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you really are. Depression marks the beginning of that journey. It tears down everything false, forcing us to confront the truth: you cannot keep living this way. When the night is darkest, the unconscious begins to speak. Jung encouraged people to pay attention to dreams during depression. Dreams may be terrifying, filled with death, collapse, ghosts, but he insisted they are not threats. They are messages. Death in a dream rarely means literal death. It means the end of a persona, a belief, a life story that no longer serves the soul. Nightmares reveal what the waking mind tries to hide. They invite us to reclaim the lost parts of ourselves. He also believed that creativity rises from the darkness. When words fail, drawing or music or storytelling helps the soul express what the mouth cannot. Jung used mandalas, circular images that emerged spontaneously from the psyche, as a map of transformation. The center of the mandala represented the self, the inner truth pushing toward birth. In depression, the old identity cracks. Through creativity, a new center slowly forms. Jung's own depression shaped him into the healer he became. Without his breakdown, there would be no shadow psychology, no archetypes, no understanding of the soul's longing for wholeness. He realized that those who face the darkness become carriers of light. He called this the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who heals by having been wounded first. Jung believed that those who have suffered depression develop a depth of compassion and wisdom that the unbroken can never fully understand. He later wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Light without darkness is not wholeness, it is denial." True healing requires courage to face the pain. The goal is not to escape the night, but to understand what it wants to alter in us. Healing is slow. The psyche moves at the pace of nature. Seeds break underground before they bloom in spring. Jung reminded us that transformation is not about forcing progress. It is about allowing the inner reorganization to unfold. Depression feels like stagnation, but something profound is happening inside. Beyond the reach of ordinary awareness, the question that depression asks is simple: what in you needs to die, and what in you is waiting to be born? Perhaps it is a false identity, a self-betraying relationship, a career that suffocates your spirit, a belief that your worth must be earned. Depression tears away illusions. As Jung saw it, darkness is not destruction, it is deconstruction. It is demolishing the old foundation so that a stronger home for the soul can be built. He encouraged people to approach depression with curiosity. Instead of saying, "How do I get rid of this?" he advised asking, "What is this trying to tell me?" That shift transforms suffering into dialogue. Depression becomes not an enemy, but a guide. He saw this again and again in his patients. Those who listened to their suffering discovered hidden passions and buried truths. They found creative gifts they had abandoned. They chose relationships rooted in honesty, not fear. They made spiritual discoveries that changed them forever. They learned that pain is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that the soul is alive. Depression can be a map. It points toward the place where the truth waits. Jung believed that the purpose of life is to become who you truly are, to find the unique meaning that your soul alone can fulfill. Depression is the moment the soul refuses to settle for less. Today, our world is full of distraction, noise, and artificial meaning. We are taught to jump from one achievement to the next, one dopamine hit to another. But beneath all that motion lies a growing emptiness. Jung would say that this is the soul starving. And when it starves, it collapses into depression, not as a failure, but as a demand for a more authentic life. He knew that danger depression carries the risk of hopelessness. Thoughts of ending everything, the belief that life cannot recover. But he insisted that, within even the deepest despair exists a spark, the self refusing to surrender. If there were truly nothing left inside you, there would be no depression, only emptiness. Depression means the soul still cares. It means something inside you is insisting on more than survival it wants. Transformation. Jung's insights offer a new way to see suffering. Instead of asking, "Why am I broken?" he invites us to ask, "What is breaking open inside me?" Instead of fearing the dark, he encourages us to trust that the night has a purpose. He believed that every breakdown carries the potential for breakthrough, not despite the suffering, but because of it. The dark night of the soul is not the end of the story. It is the middle, the moment when everything familiar dissolves so the truth can emerge. Jung wrote, "As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Depression creates the darkness, so the inner light can finally be seen. This light does not appear suddenly. It flickers at first, a faint return of curiosity, a single moment of beauty breaking through the numbness, a whisper of desire saying there is something more. Little by little, the psyche restores what was lost. Hope returns not as a grand explosion, but as a quiet heartbeat. The self rises through the broken pieces of the old identity. Building a new story from the ashes, there comes a day quietly, unexpectedly, when the individual realizes that they are no longer drowning. The heaviness begins to lift. The world doesn't change all at once, but the connection to life returns. And what emerges is not the same self that went into the darkness. Something has strengthened. Something has widened. Something has awakened. Jung's work teaches us that those who endure depression become deeper, more compassionate, more human. They carry knowledge that cannot be learned from books, the knowledge that suffering can transform. They become living proof that the darkest nights produce the most meaningful dawns. If you are in that darkness now, Jung would not tell you to fight your feelings or to pretend to be strong. He would tell you to breathe, to be gentle with yourself, to listen to the silence, to trust that the pain itself has a purpose, that it is trying to show you the path back to your soul. He would remind you that you are not alone. Countless others have walked through nights as dark as yours and emerged reborn. Jung would say that the shadow at your door is not here to destroy you. It is here to save you from the life you were never meant to live. The dark night is asking you to surrender who you were, so you can discover who you are. In that sense, depression is not the moment you lose yourself. It is the moment your true self begins calling for you. The moment the self says, "Enough. It is time to come home." The hidden gifts of depression cannot be seen in the darkness. They reveal themselves in time, through insight, meaning, creativity, compassion, and rebirth. Depression scars us, but those scars become maps. They remind us where we've been and who we've become by surviving. Jung believed every soul holds a unique light. That light is not found in perfection, but in pain. Not in pretending, but in becoming. Not in the smile worn for others, but in the tears shed alone. The dark night of the soul is sacred, said, because it is the birthplace of transformation. It is the moment the soul finally refuses to play dead. It is when hope is not lost, only hidden. And eventually, slowly, gently, the dawn arrives. Your darkness has meaning. Your suffering has a purpose. Your soul is speaking. Listen, Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But this privilege does not come cheaply. It demands struggle. It demands honesty. It demands we walk through the valley of darkness where everything familiar collapses, and every false certainty dissolves into ash. Jung believed that depression is often this valley, not a malfunction, not a failure, but a sacred initiation. When we lose our way, when the world no longer fits, when the surface cracks, the soul is preparing us for transformation. He saw this most clearly in his own life. After breaking from Freud, he watched the life he had built fall apart. He was already a respected doctor, a rising figure in psychology, celebrated as the next great leader of psychoanalysis, and then suddenly he was alone. He would sit in his study, trembling, terrified of his own mind. Visions would rise from the depths, ancient warriors, flames, floods, shadowy figures. His rational self tried to cling to control, but something deeper demanded surrender. Depression hit him with the full weight of meaninglessness. Yet inside that darkness, the roots of his greatest discoveries were quietly forming. It was during these years that Jung realized something profound. Depression is the soul withdrawing its energy from the world. The ego, the part of us that performs, succeeds, pretends, is no longer in charge. The psyche refuses to play along with who we think we are. All the plans that once seemed important suddenly seem pointless. The career, the roles, the expectations, they crumble. And beneath those ruins waits a truth we have long ignored. Jung would later write, "A psychoneurosis must be understood as suffering of the soul which has not discovered its meaning. We become depressed not because we are weak, but because we have reached a limit where the old direction in life cannot take us forward. Something new is calling, but we do not yet know its name. And so the darkness feels empty, silent, merciless. What we don't realize is that this emptiness is the womb of rebirth. For Jung, the self is not created, it is uncovered. We are born whole, but as we grow, we begin hiding pieces of ourselves. The parts that are too wild, too honest, too wounded, too strange. We abandon them into the shadows. We become polite instead of truthful. We become impressive instead of real. We become efficient instead of alive. And little by little, our spirit suffocates under the weight of our own performance. The shadow is everything we have rejected in ourselves' fears. Anger, tenderness, sexuality, creativity, vulnerability. Jung believed that depression arrives when the shadow becomes too heavy to ignore. The true self has been buried for too long, and now it demands to be seen. It demands its life back. He often used a powerful metaphor. Depression is like a woman in black. When she appears, do not push her away. Do not escape into distraction, addiction, denial. Instead, he said, invite her to sit at the table. Ask what she wants. Ask what she has come to teach. Because she always arrives with a message. Depression is not against us. It is for us. It tears apart the life that is too small for who we really are. Jung believed that each of us carries a blueprint within a deeper design of who we are meant to become. This destiny is what he called the self, the central organizing force of the psyche. The ego wants comfort. The self wants truth. And truth, like birth, is painful. So the self pushes us through the dark night of the soul, stripping away every illusion until only what is real remains. The dark night feels like death because something is dying. The false identity, the obedient self, the carefully constructed persona, the one who lived only to please. In its place, a new self begins to form, one that speaks with your voice, not the voice of expectation. But to hear that voice, we must enter silence. To find our inner truth, we must first lose outer certainty. Jung saw that dreams often guide us through this transformation. When the conscious mind is confused, the unconscious speaks in symbols. A dream of a cave points inward. A dream of water signals emotional rebirth. A dream of strangers reveals disowned parts of ourselves. Jung spent years interpreting his own visions, face to face with figures from the depths of the psyche, wise elders, terrifying demons, mythic archetypes. They were not hallucinations to him. They were guides. They were the messengers of the unconscious, telling him that the story of his life had only just begun. He learned that the soul does not speak in logic. It speaks in symbols, metaphors, images. Depression is one of those symbols, a psychological nightfall whose purpose is to lead us to mourning. He realized that healing is not simply the removal of suffering. Healing is the discovery of meaning. Without meaning, even joy feels hollow. With meaning, even pain has dignity. As he slowly emerged from his own darkness, Jung began shaping what would become the heart of his psychology: individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. This journey is not about becoming perfect. It is not about becoming what others want. It is about uniting all parts of ourselves, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, into a life that is genuine. Individuation is the process by which the soul remembers itself. But individuation begins with descent. The seed must go into the soil before it can sprout. The caterpillar dissolves inside the cocoon, frightened and unrecognizable before wings form. Ashtam saw depression as this cocoon, a spiritual chrysalis. where our old identity disintegrates so a fuller self can emerge. This is why he said, "When we are in the darkest night, we are closest to the light." The light is not destroyed, it is hidden, waiting for our eyes to adjust. Modern society fears darkness. We fear grief, we fear silence, we fear being alone with ourselves. We drown out the inner voice with noise and movement and endless tasks, but the psyche will not be ignored. When we stop listening voluntarily, it forces us to stop through collapse. Depression is that stoppage, a sacred interruption. It pauses life so the soul can breathe. Many who go through depression later describe a moment, maybe years later, when they realize it was a turning point. They say, "That was the moment I began to understand who I truly am. That was when I found the courage to leave a life that wasn't mine. That was when I discovered my purpose. The time it felt like the worst thing that ever happened." Looking back, they see it was the doorway, the narrow gate to authenticity. Jung knew that not everyone would make sense of their suffering while inside it. The darkness can feel endless. The pain can feel meaningless. Hope can disappear entirely. He understood this deeply because he lived it. He would later reflect that his depression was the greatest gift of his life because it forced him to meet his soul. He believed that every person carries something inside that wants to be realized. Not a fantasy, not a dream, but a truth that is uniquely theirs. Depression often arises where that truth is being denied. It is the consequences of abandoning ourselves. Jung would say, "Do not aim to be perfect, aim to be complete." Completeness requires us to face everything, especially what hurts. There is a moment in healing when the darkness shifts, not because the pain is gone, but because we stop running from it. We turn toward what we fear. We look at the shadow directly. We listen, and the very thing that once terrified us becomes a guide. The dragon becomes a protector. The wound becomes a doorway. The night becomes a teacher. Jung believed that depression becomes destructive only when we resist it, when we treat it as an enemy to be suppressed, rather than a messenger to be understood. Medication and therapy have their place. Jung respected both, but he warned that if we silence the message without hearing it, the suffering returns in new forms. The psyche will not rest until its truth is lived. This is why he spoke of depression as a call, a dark summons toward wisdom. Not everyone will answer that call. Not everyone will trust the hidden intelligence of their suffering, but those who do often discover a new kind of strength, the strength of someone who has walked through hell and returned carrying fire. He often asked his patients, "What is the meaning of your sadness? What is seeking expression through this pain?" The answers were never simple, but they were always revealing. Sometimes the depression was demanding creativity, sometimes authenticity, sometimes freedom, sometimes healing from trauma that had long been buried. But always, the message was, you cannot continue living the way you used to. Something deeper wants to live through you. Many believed they were breaking down. Jung told them they were breaking open. He encouraged people to stop seeing themselves as broken. He believed the psyche is always trying to heal, always trying to grow, always moving toward wholeness, even when it feels like destruction. Depression might look like collapse, but it is often construction happening in the dark. He would remind people, do not kill the messenger just because you do not like the message. Your depression is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to remove the life that is destroying you. Jung taught that when we face darkness consciously, we discover hidden strengths, creativity, intuition, spirituality, resilience, gifts that cannot be developed in the comfort of daylight. The soul shapes diamonds slowly, deep beneath the surface, under intense pressure. Depression is that pressure, fierce, silent, reshaping us, cell by cell. When we emerge, we are no longer made of fragile glass. We are made of crystal, and Jung's legacy shows us something even more hopeful. Transformation is contagious. When one person chooses to heal, others around them feel permission to heal too. The courage we gain in darkness becomes light for others lost in their own night. Our wounds become offerings. Our survival becomes testimony. Jung believed humanity is a tapestry. Every soul's growth contributes to the whole. There will always be people who look at depression and see only illness. Jung asks us to look deeper, to see growth concealed in grief, meaning concealed in emptiness, rebirth concealed in death. The dark night of the soul may strip us of everything we thought we were, but it leaves us with the truth of what we are meant to become. Who looks outside dreams, Jung wrote. Who looks inside awakens. Depression is that awakening, raw, uncomfortable, holy. It hurts because growth hurts. It isolates because transformation is a solitary journey. It frightens because birth is frightening. Yet beyond the fear, beyond the numbness, beyond the collapse, something waits. Something ancient, something wise. Something that has loved you from the beginning. The self calling you home. Depression is not a detour in the story of becoming ourselves. It is part of the journey, the sacred underworld portion of every soul's myth. Jung often pointed out that all great stories include a descent, Dante into hell, Jonah into the whale, Christ into the tomb. Not because suffering is glorious, but because the deepest treasures are hidden in the places we fear to go. The gold is always buried in the darkest cave. For Jung, this wasn't just a poetic metaphor. He believed that the psyche evolves through crisis. When the ego clings to the familiar, to habits, to old dreams, to external approval, life has no choice but to interrupt us. Events unravel, relationships collapse, careers dissolve, identities break. And in that breaking, the deeper self finally speaks. Depression is that voice, ancient, insistent, wise, saying, "There is more to you than this. You are not finished yet. You must grow." Many people resist this call. They numb themselves. They distract themselves. They bury the message under noise, substances, endless scrolling, endless doing. But the soul does not give up. It waits. It watches. It tightens the rope of discomfort until we can no longer ignore what we must confront. Jung said, "What you resist persists." Resistance turns sadness into despair, exhaustion into collapse, meaning-seeking into hopelessness. But the moment we become curious, even just a little, something changes. Jung noticed that the first sign of healing is not the disappearance of pain. It is the soft flicker of awareness, the willingness to ask, "Why have you come? What do you need me to see?" Depression begins to shift when we stop seeing it as our destroyer and start seeing it as our teacher. He guided people to turn inward gently, not with force or self-judgment, but with compassion. "Sit with your sorrow," he would say. "Listen to it. It has been trying to speak for a long time." When we finally sit still, when we finally allow tears to fall instead of swallowing them, when we finally admit we are tired of pretending, the truth finds us, and the truth is often this: we have abandoned something essential. A dream, a talent, a relationship with the deeper self. We traded authenticity for acceptance, passion for practicality, wonder for safety, and the soul grieves that loss. Depression is the grief of the unlived life. Jung believed each human carries a flame, a spark of the eternal, wants to express itself in the world. When that flame is ignored, it dims. When it dims, the world loses color. When color disappears, despair enters. He once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Depression pushes us to do exactly that, not because life wants to punish us, but because life refuses to let our fire go out. He witnessed countless people who reached their lowest point only to discover later that the darkness had been preparing them for their calling. The breakup that shattered them allowed them to finally choose someone who saw their real worth. The job that burned them out led them to their true vocation. The loneliness that suffocated them gave birth to creativity so powerful that it touched the lives of others. Suffering is never meaningless when the soul is involved. The meaning just takes time to reveal itself. Jung spoke of archetypes, universal patterns in every human psyche. One of those is the wounded healer. It is the idea that only those who have been broken know how to help others become whole. He believed that those who have experienced profound darkness often develop extraordinary empathy, intuition, wisdom, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. The darkness becomes the training ground for the heart. Many of Jung's patients eventually thanked their depression. They said that without it, they would have continued sleepwalking through a life that was not theirs. Depression forced them to wake up. Jung would smile quietly, knowing that this recognition meant they had survived the night. And dawn was now rising, but he never romanticized suffering. He knew depression is brutal. It steals appetite, sleep, motivation. It isolates. It whispers lies that you don't matter, that nothing can change, that there is no point. Jung did not deny these horrors. He sat beside them. He acknowledged their power. And he offered a counter-message: this darkness has purpose. Stay with it long enough, and you will find the light it hides. He emphasized that healing does not happen quickly. The soul moves at the pace of truth, not the pace of urgency. We live in a culture that demands instant relief, quick fixes, quick escapes, quick answers. But the kind of change depression requires cannot be rushed. It is transformation, not repair. It is rebirth, not recovery. Rebirth takes time. A lot of time, and patience, and kindness, and trust, especially when trust feels impossible. Jung said the greatest mistake during depression is believing that the darkness will last forever. The night does feel endless while we are in it. But night has never once defeated morning. The sun always returns, even when we cannot see the sky. Jung reminded people that they do not have to believe in the light, they only have to wait for it. He would encourage them to find the smallest threads of connection, a friend who listens without judgment, a creative practice no matter how imperfect, a walk outside, a conversation with a therapist, a moment of self-forgiveness. These are not cures, they are lifelines. And every lifeline matters. Every small act of compassion toward oneself is a candle lit in the night. Through his own darkness, Jung learned that we heal by becoming whole, not by cutting away the pain, but by integrating it into our story. He taught that our wounds are not stains to be hidden away. They are chapters of our becoming. Pain becomes wisdom when we stop running from it. Fear becomes courage when we face it. Grief becomes love when we honor it. He once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This sentence carries his entire philosophy. The light is not somewhere outside us. It is hidden inside the very place we are afraid to look. The deepest transformation comes when we accept that we cannot go back to the person we were before the depression. That version of us was too small, too silent, too afraid, too obedient, too disconnected from our truth. Depression is not an interruption of life's journey. It is the part of the journey where the true story begins. Jung called this next phase individuation, the long, deliberate path toward authenticity. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or healed or endlessly positive. It is about becoming honest, real, aligned. It is about allowing all parts of ourselves, the joyful, the wounded, the flawed, the brilliant, the strange, to coexist without rejection. It is about living a life that belongs to our soul, not to expectation. As people integrate their shadow, something beautiful happens. They no longer fear who they are. They no longer shrink themselves to fit into places they were never meant to belong. They no longer pretend they are fine when they are hurting. They become whole. Wholeness does not mean constant happiness. It means truthful living. It means choosing paths that nourish the inner life, not just impress the outer world. It means relationships built on real connection, not performance. It means work that feels meaningful, not just useful. It means saying yes to what makes the soul feel alive and no to what drains its light. People who have emerged from the dark night often say that life feels more vivid, colors are richer, compassion is deeper. Gratitude is no longer a theory, it is a daily miracle. They discover that their sensitivity, the very thing that made them vulnerable to depression, is also their greatest strength. Sensitivity is the instrument of the soul. It feels everything because it is meant to connect with everything. It is the doorway to empathy, creativity, depth, spirituality. The world desperately needs sensitive people, those who have been broken open and still choose love. And this is the final gift of depression in Jung's philosophy. Transformation is not just for the one who lives it, it ripples outward. A person who has faced inner darkness carries a lantern for others. Their story becomes guidance. Their courage becomes comfort. Their presence becomes proof that survival is possible. Jung understood that healing is never an individual event. It is a contribution to humanity. Each person who finds meaning in their suffering helps shift the collective psyche toward wholeness. The dark night of the soul, then, is not just a private struggle. It is a spiritual revolution happening from the inside out. He believed that one day we would stop seeing depression as a disease to be ashamed of. We would see it as a powerful turning point, the moment a human being begins to remember why they are alive. The moment they stop living from the ego and start living from the self. The moment they step into their purpose. The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. Jung wrote, "They can never be solved, only outgrown." Depression is not a puzzle to fix. It is a skin to shed. When the shedding is complete, we step into a life that is more than survival. We step into a life that feels like belonging to ourselves, to the earth, to the spirit that animates us. We carry our scars not as marks of shame, but as symbols of courage. We walk with a gentleness toward ourselves and others, shaped by what we have endured. We discover joy again, not the fragile joy of pretending, but the steady joy of truth. This is what Jung wanted the world to understand. The darkness that once threatened to destroy you may become the very darkness that saves you. Depression is a night the soul passes through, and on the other side of night lies morning. Not the return of the old life, but the birth of a new one. One that is deeper. One that is truer. One that is unmistakably yours. And when that morning finally comes, you will rise knowing this. You were never broken. You were transforming. Every tear watered the soil of your becoming. Every silence taught your heart to listen. Every emptiness made space for the self to emerge. Pain was not your enemy. It was your guide. You are not your depression. You are the courage that faced it. You are not your pain. You are the transformation it created. And in that transformation, you are unstoppable, undeniable, unbreakable. The night has passed. The dawn is yours. And you are finally, gloriously free